In the last video, we determined what our expectation is for equity value on the assumed exit at March 31st, 2018. We're saying that we think that there's going to be $6 billion worth of equity value available at exit that's given all of these debt levels, given this EBITDA exit multiple assumption, etc. In this video, we turn to sort of how we carve up that equity among all the providers of equity capital. Now, the two obvious providers of equity capital, I should say, let's start with the most obvious provider of equity capital, which is the financial sponsors. So Golden Gate and Bain Capital both provided the primary equity in this deal. We're saying that they're contributing $1 billion to finance this deal on day one. The most of the remainder of the financing is coming from lenders. But remember, we're also saying the management is rolling over, at least hypothetically, because this did not happen in the BMC deal. But just to kind of show you how it would play out in the model, the management would also be rolling over some of their equity from the old co into the new co, $176 million. So before sort of talking about the preferred shareholders or the subordinated lenders and what they might be doing here in the equity section, in addition to being in the debt section, let's talk about these guys. So we reference the equity component as their initial equity investment and calculate their percent ownership based on those investments. So 998 million divided by the sum total of both of these, which comes out to 1.1 billion, ends up being 85%, as well as 15, and sort of the flip side to that is 15% for management equity. So this formula here also captures all the preferred stock and subordinated notes, but we could also just kind of do something like this. We could have certainly done something like this, which is probably a little bit of a simpler formula. Calculate sort of the sponsor equity divided by the sum of both of these, and then the next one is just 1 minus that 85%. The formula that we originally had in place is a little more versatile in case the preferred shareholders or subordinated notes ever actually directly injected some equity capital as well, which is theoretically possible, but certainly something that you would have to sort of tweak the model a little bit to make work. So we had more of a catch-all formula. It doesn't matter how you do it. Just get the numbers to work out so that it's either looks something like this, or it's the more straightforward this. Okay. So now we're saying, hey, these are the ownership splits. But one of the things that I've alluded to in prior videos was the idea that preferred shareholders and subordinated lenders sometimes get equity kickers or sweeteners in their financing. So in addition to providing $220 million worth of, in exchange for providing $220 million of debt financing immediately and $260 million of providing preferred stock, they may also get some warrants attached to that loan where they say, okay, not only are we going to give you a interest on that, and if you sort of scroll up here, remember these were the terms that we hypothesized for the subordinated notes. They would get a 4% PIK, and they'd also get an 8% cash interest. So every year they're getting all this, which is sort of a nice return. But perhaps in addition to that, given how low they are in the capital structure and given the risk that they take, they may have also negotiated some sort of warrant, which amounts to some equity ownership at the tail end of the deal. Similarly, for preferred stock, in addition to getting what amounts to really 12% interest, 1/3 of in the form of a PIK that accrues to the principal that they're going to get at the very end, and the remaining portion of it being cash interest or cash dividends that they're getting every period, they would also negotiate some sort of warrant. So here we have placeholders to sort of accommodate for that. And let's say the preferred shareholders negotiated that they would get 2% of the equity, and the subordinated notes would get 1% of the equity via warrants. This is sort of the typical vehicle for which they actually get the equity at the tail end. Now, what that means is that the fully diluted ownership percentages for the sponsor and the management have to get dialed down a little bit. They have to reflect the fact that you have these new ownerships. And so the formula here has to accommodate that. And the formula basically takes this formula and sort of tweaks it to basically divide that 85%, or to multiply that 85% by 1 minus the 2% minus the 1%. So now we're taking the 97%, which is sort of the pie that now belongs to the sponsor and management equity. and dividing that by 85%. That gets you to 82.4. And same thing here, we take 3%, or sorry, we take that 97% again and multiply it by the 15%. So on a fully diluted basis, these are the numbers that we have to go by. These are the ownership splits, okay? And so at this point, it's actually pretty straightforward. All we have to do now is kind of anchor, make sure that we anchor the row here, and anchor all of this, copy and paste this across, make sure we got it, and then we can copy and paste this down. Oh, no, we actually needed to just anchor the column, not the row in this one, so let's anchor the column. F4 anchors the column for us. And now I think we're in business. Now we got everything right. And so this is telling us, hey, that at these different multiples, the equity owners are going to get different amounts depending on what you exit at. See, lenders aren't really dependent on what the exit valuation is. They have contractual rights to getting a certain amount of principal back. Whereas the equity owners, their returns are, and this is obvious, I guess, it's just completely dependent on what you exit at. So if you guys can complete this section, just make sure that you've got this table, make sure that you understand how this table works, fill in 2% and 1% to kind of see how the returns play out. Again, these are totally hypothetical. The BMC deal did not have warrants attached to any preferred stock or subordinated notes. They didn't have any subordinated notes, preferred stock, or management rollover to begin with. In the BMC deal, it actually looks something like this. None of this really played out. But I want you guys to include this just to, it all went to the sponsor equity. But I want you to see how it all plays out because there are going to be many deals that you work on where there are going to be these multiple tranches. So I want you guys to go ahead, complete this video, and when you're ready, we're going to move on to the final sort of core piece of this, which is really quantifying the returns to all of these equity providers. Who got the highest returns here? Who's going to get the highest IRRs? What are the sponsors going to be happy? We can, now we can turn to that video and sort of calculate that.